is Mayor Live, and to a extremely important, an extremely important. We're going to put this down just a little bit here because we're going to do something a little different tonight. But there's a very, very important question that we're going to be addressing tonight, and it's very simple. Have we become a fascist state in the manner in which George Soros has spent millions to make us a fascist state by placing his multi-million dollar criminally oriented prosecutors in 40 or 50 states? So far, it's manifested itself in a crime wave, one of the largest we've ever had in the history of this country. Last year, and the year before, many cities in this country set records for the amount of crime. For example, the old city of Philadelphia, murders than ever before in its history. The city of Rochester, just a short while ago, a very peaceful upstate New York community, very beautiful community, colleges, businesses, set a record for homicide, murder. I'm not sure it did that in 21. I came very close in 22, if it didn't exceed it in 22. New York over the last 2 to 3 years has had significant increases in murder. They've come down just a little bit. But on the other hand, crime itself is up 30 or 40%. Retail crime is so bad that stores are fleeing New York, and the ones that are remaining are locking things under bars and like they do in the third world countries I've been in. We know what's happening in Los Angeles, and San Francisco is probably gone. Los Angeles is headed that way. Also with, well, in San Francisco, a Soros prosecutor who was removed, but may have done permanent damage. And in Los Angeles, a Soros prosecutor they are threatening to remove, but crime in Los Angeles capita much greater than even New York, where people are fleeing New York in large numbers because of crime. The district attorney in New York is not by any means singular. He's one of 40 or 50 DAs, really unsuited and unqualified for the job, total lack of any integrity at all, put there by the millions and millions of dollars, upwards of 40 million spent by George Soros to put radical DAs in office who have no desire to prosecute anyone, but who largely engage in putting criminals back out on the street. In my own city, I probably know it best because I was the mayor who did the impossible and turned New York City around when I was told it couldn't be done. And just so for the record, I reduced crime in New York over my 8 years more than any other mayor ever did in New York, or more than any other mayor ever did anywhere. I don't think it's even close. So I think I know what I'm talking about. And right now, my city's being destroyed. This district attorney is pursuing Donald Trump in a what is without any doubt, unless you are just the most partisan, knuckleheaded individual in the world, or just a complete liar. If we can't agree that this is a political prosecution, then there's nothing we can agree on. No law enforcement purpose to this prosecution at all, other than politics. Or maybe it's easier to ask you this question. Is there any doubt in your mind that there are two standards of justice in this country when you see Hunter Biden and Joe Biden walking around free, or fifth time that the crooked Democrats have tried to pursue Trump for crimes that he didn't commit, for non-crimes like Russian collusion or the conversation with the president of Ukraine, which was totally defensible, but would have been even more defensible had had the FBI and Attorney General Barr and others not covered up the hard drive. Can you believe they covered up the hard presidential election and elected a president under false pretenses? And now, day after day, new crimes emerge, the most recent of which involves very significant questions of national security and of a president who may very well be compromised by our biggest. All of that is without any investigation until now by Republican House members. There's been no arrests, there have been no search warrants, there have been no Gestapo Nazi raids like there have been on Trump people by the FBI. There haven't been invasions of like they did to Trump through me and others. There's been not a single law enforcement action that we can tell really taken, and it's been years since many of these allegations are not only known, but it's been years since the evidence has been available. Witnesses have been allowed to disappear, who knows, maybe even die. On the other hand, we've got a case that now is threatened to be brought in New York that is over. By all intents and purposes, it is barred by the statute of limitations, which is being stretched by a questionable interpretation of it. Really, prosecutions of presidents should never be with questionable interpretations, particularly since we've never prosecuted a president before, a president sitting or ex. This will be the first time it's being done. And the irony of it is it's being done by a prosecutor who doesn't prosecute anyone else. This is a prosecutor who has dismissed 52% or taken 52% of the felony arrests made by the best police department in the country and reduced them to misdemeanors. And most of those people were released. This is a prosecutor where every day we have an example in our newspapers of someone thrown on a subway track, someone shot in the head, someone beaten to the point of death almost, schools violated, sexual crimes at all-time highs, retail crimes to such an extent that people are fleeing the city in record numbers, all done by people that he did not hold on bail. He arrested a man for first or second degree murder, I don't remember it is, who was defending himself and only released him after there was massive outcry. The man has since left the United States, gone back to the Dominican Republic where he believes he's safer. Might have made the right choice compared to New York City. This particular prosecution, where the criminal justice system is being used for political purposes, is, of course, without doubt, not the first time that's been done by Democrats, starting with the Clintons through the Bidens. Basically only does that. But this is about as clear as you can get. President Trump is alleged to have paid through Michael Cohen money to this woman, Stormy Daniels, so that she would not, so that she would be silent about her allegation that they had a consensual affair. He denies having had that affair with her. His well-known germophobia to his friends like me says that he's telling the truth. But in any event, she was willing to accept $130,000 or $150,000. I don't remember exactly how much. Enter into a non-disclosure agreement some time ago, negotiated by Michael Cohen, who may be one of the biggest proven liars in the history of the justice system. So bad that he was declared non-usable by the U.S. Attorney's Office that sits right across the street from the criminal-loving DA Alvin Bragg. But it's it's an office made up of at least enough people who have retained their good faith and their legal abilities, and from derangement syndrome, communism, Sorosism, or just pure insane progressive, let all the criminals out of jail ism. Bragg apparently is going to bring this case. And what is the charge? You should know the case was passed on by the United States Attorney's Office as a campaign contribution violation for any number of reasons, not the least of which they threw Bragg's star witness out as being beyond belief. He had lied so often, and he had committed the cardinal sin of cooperators. He had lied after he cooperated, which is a cardinal sin and one that prosecutors almost always prosecute, because that's the only way you have credibility in front of a jury. Let's take some like Sammy the Bull, who testified against John Gotti, a man who lived a life of crime and murder. So Sammy the Bull is not a believable person, right? He's lied all his life. Well, the prosecutor argues to the jury, he cooperated with the government. We can corroborate everything he's saying. He's promised to tell the truth completely. And should he now commit perjury in any respect after this, he'll be very severely prosecuted. Since Cohen, like he used to call it, turned state's evidence, the criminals call, he's not told the truth. He's actually lied on numerous occasions, sometimes really flagrantly, like before the Congress, where United States congressmen have cited him for 5 to 7 instances of perjury. Let me give you 2 that are easy, and you've seen them on my podcast. In fact, the first one I discovered. While he was testifying, he astonishingly said under oath, having sworn to tell the truth after a lifetime of lying and after saying he had seen God, he said that he never asked for a job in the White House. Caught my breath because he had asked me to get him a job in the White House. I was only one of about 10 people that he had asked. So I knew immediately that he was lying, and I knew astonishingly he was lying after he had become a cooperating witness, tried to become a cooperating witness or a witness. To be untrue, he would be not usable as a witness and probably prosecuted if the prosecutor still had any integrity. So I searched immediately for the proof that existed, and I sort of assembled very, very quickly about 8 or 10 people to whom he asked for a job. But I knew that the press would say they were all lying. 51 Trump intelligence, Biden intelligence people can say that I was a Russian agent and be lying, and nothing is done to them, even though they're a bunch of but if I got 5 or 6 or 7 Trump associates who said that Cohen asked for a job, they'd say they're all lying. And then all of a sudden, someone remembered, I don't remember who, they should get the Pulitzer Prize, that he was on television. Just didn't. Lo and behold, you go right to Google, you pull it out, and there he is, a wannabe mafia guy, Cohen. That's the way he talks, just like that. Doesn't really talk like a lot of people are surprised he's a lawyer. So he said, Chris Cuomo, who has quite a close relationship with him, said to him, congratulations, I understand you asked for it and you're going to be chief of staff. Yes, that's right. I'm going to be chief of staff in the Trump White House to be, and that's what I will be. That is, so then you take his testimony in front of the congressional committee, where the chairman of the committee had threatened to prosecute him if he committed perjury. And he said, I never asked for a job in the administration. And then you have him saying to Cuomo, congratulations on the job that you Yeah, I wanted to be chief of staff, and I was. Okay, I'm going to be chief of staff. I mean, there's so many lies contained in that, it would make your head spin. And why so unusual? Only because it happened after he cooperated. And because the cardinal rule for prosecutors is, boy, you don't prosecute one of these guys and they commit perjury after they cooperated, nobody's going to believe you when you get up there and say, we're going to hold them to their promise. Oh, he went on and told other lies. I can't even remember what they are. Equally as provable as that one. As a result of the accumulation of lies collected by the United States Attorney's Office, they refused to do any kind of cooperation with him. They basically said he was persona non grata as a witness, which happens sometimes. I did that a few times. People are so incredible that they'd be a disgrace to your ongoing efforts to have a fair and just criminal justice system and your credibility with juries and jurors that you just can't use them as witnesses. Michael Cohen fits into that category. I heard him on television today. He's still a bigger liar as he was then, and he hasn't taken any speech rehabilitation courses. And he's an extraordinarily bitter man because he spent his whole life trying to ingratiate himself to Donald Trump. And people want to know the answer to why did he put the money out himself? Because he was kissing. You got it? He was kissing. Nobody liked him except Donald Trump, who liked him, I would say, had marginal respect for his abilities and used him for tasks like this to negotiate a non-disclosure agreement. They call this hush money. There are about 1 million of these hush money agreements in New York right now. They're extraordinarily common. They happen all the time. They happen when cases are settled, commercial cases, more often than not, personal cases, divorce cases. They purposes. Someone makes an allegation of sexual misconduct against a man, despite the radicals' view that women never lie. Unfortunately, let me dissuade you of the notion that women are human, just as human as men. They lie about as often as men. Now we have Bob Costello on, and we're going to put this up because I want you to hear this. Wow. I just spent 2 hours or so testifying jury in downtown Manhattan, and I got my point across, although it was clear to me that the Manhattan DA's office did not want to get to the point. I need to explain that a little bit. I called them up after I saw Michael Cohen on TV stating things that he said. You would like right now, while you have me on, feel free. Otherwise, you can hear the audio. This is Robert Costello, who represented Mr. Cohen, a very distinguished New York lawyer, my lawyer. Now, not then. To inform both sides. So that's what I did. I had a ton of documents that I had prepared back in 2019 for the Department of Justice. The U.S. Attorney's Office called me up and said, Mr. Costello, we would like to talk to you about the representation of Michael Cohen. I laughed and said, can I presume you have the attorney-client privilege? And they said, you presume correctly. I said, fine, send it over. I'll be delighted to talk to you. That waiver is very clear. And once we had that, I prepared 330 emails, a bunch of text messages. I prepared a contemporaneous report of our first meeting with Michael Cohen at the Regency Hotel in Manhattan, as well as a contemporaneous notes of the interview I had for 2 hours with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, as well as contemporaneous notes of an interview by the House Committee on Intelligence, who sent 3 investigators to mine, who is now
Dan Goldman, a congressman here in New York. So I had all of this material ready. I sent it to Donald Trump's lawyer, and I sent it to the Manhattan DA's office. And I contacted the Manhattan DA's office, and I asked, could we meet with Alvin Bragg? Because I wanted to present this to Alvin Bragg, presented it to the Southern District. I wanted him to look me in the eye and assess my credibility. Did I have more credibility than Michael Cohen? Because Michael Cohen, in my opinion, was lying about just about everything. I specifically told them that there were two main points that I wanted to make clear. That Cohen had told us that when we first met, suicidal. Why is that important? Because when you're suicidal, thinking that that's the only way out of your legal mess, and you're presented with the following options, that you could cooperate against Donald Trump and provide information that would get you a get out of jail free card, and you respond to not have any information on Donald Trump. And he said it many times during that 2-hour meeting. I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything on Donald Trump. And I had my law partner who knew Michael Cohen for 10 years on Columbia Grammar and Prep School here in Manhattan, because Cohen was on the board of directors.
Yeah.
And when I heard him say that he was suicidal the weekend before, standing on the roof of the Regency Hotel, I didn't know whether he was a drama queen or telling the truth. So I looked at my partner and he shook his head and nodded. I think he's telling the truth. And later on, we got that corroborated by the Reverend Jerry Falwell and his wife, who had dinner with Michael Cohen, who told him the same thing. Why is that important? Because when you're willing to give up your life in order to avoid these legal troubles, when they're insurmountable to you, and you're offered a way out, so all you have to do is cooperate on Donald Trump. Do you have anything on Donald Trump? And he says no repeatedly. I swear to God, Bob, I don't have anything. You know that you got a guy who probably doesn't have anything. It's certainly easier to give up information on Donald Trump than it is to kill yourself. On top of that, while he's making these speeches during 2-hour period, he's marching up and down on the other side of the conference table like a tiger in the zoo, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. He looked like he hadn't slept in 5 days. He looked like somebody who was suicidal. And every once in a while, he would stop and point at us. When I say once in a while, he did this at least 20 times and said, guys, I want you to know, I will do whatever the F I have to do. I will never spend one. Now, what he's saying is, I'll lie, cheat, steal, shoot somebody. I will not spend a day in jail. Do you think a guy whose mentality is that is going to not admit that he has information on Donald Trump? But having said that, the DA's office didn't ask me questions to bring that up. And I brought it up anyway. I ignored their questions and simply gave them the information. I'm hearing rap in my ear, left and right. I'll continue if you want, but
let me just ask you one final question, if it's okay, Mr. Costello.
Sure.
If you were the DA, you were a prosecutor, and you were fair and honest and served the law rather than a political agenda, you'd want to know that, wouldn't you?
Absolutely. And I told them and told the grand jury today, I was deputy chief of the criminal division of the U.S. attorneys for the Southern District. I said, I wouldn't touch a witness like Michael Cohen for any amount of money. You simply cannot rely upon this guy. And tonight, he was on another station denying that he waived the attorney-client privilege. Here it is, in writing, and that's his signature on the second page. So I guess he didn't know that, and the district attorney didn't know that. And I told them, Michael Cohen has been in your office 20 times, and twice in the grand jury. Tell you that he waived the attorney-client privilege 22 times? I mean, really, is this the kind of witness you want to ride to the finish line? Not in my opinion.
I think all they care about is the finish line, but I sure appreciate the information that you brought us tonight.
You're
welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So that's direct testimony, right on point on the credibility of the single and only witness against Donald Trump to the non-crime that was committed. Remember, even he's telling the truth, which he isn't, it's not a crime. Which we'll get into in a minute. I mean, I shouldn't be laughing, because this is a absolute affirmation that we are where, oh gosh, about a year ago, I started telling you we were headed toward communism and fascism. We're there now. This is a fascist prosecution. When you prosecute for purely political purposes, you have become a third world country. This is what happens in third world countries and in communist countries and in fascist countries. This is what happened under Stalin. This is what happened under Mao. This is what is happening in China. This is what happened under Hitler. You prosecute your political enemies. You make up charges against them. You get people to lie about them. And you have no justice system. What the Soros Democrats have done is to destroy the greatest justice system ever created by men and women. It's a tragedy to this country. Of course, it's a horrible thing for Donald Trump as a singular individual, just like it was a horrible thing for all the other people that they pursued based on false charges. Carter Page, Mr. Papadopoulos, Rudy Giuliani, yes. Of course. But Donald Trump has a piece of wisdom, and I don't know, only he has, and many people have said this. This is about you. It's not about him. You can be for him or against him or neutral or not have made up your mind yet. You got to be against this. And it's about you because this guy Bragg is not just in bad old New York City. You got to brag in St. Louis. You got to brag in Philadelphia, where you set a record for murder. I just saw some people from Philadelphia last night, night before, at, of all places, Mar-a-Lago, who said to me, we've been there for, this district attorney is insane. He was one of Soros's first criminal-loving district attorneys, who the police can't, I think he handles about 8 to 10% of the cases the police give him. I know New York better than Philadelphia, probably better than anybody, and alive, at least certainly from the point of view of how to fight crime. I can tell you that there are about, I'm probably right on the money here, about 7,000 felons walking the streets that weren't walking the streets when I was the mayor or Bloomberg was the mayor. And that's the reason the city that had become, that I had made the safest large city in America, now has the biggest exodus of people of any city in the country. Because we have a district attorney who is frightening to our people, who does not protect our children in schools, who does nothing to protect our elderly are being attacked in ways I've never seen before, even in the bad old days. The numbers of crime have still not reached the Dinkins level and that level of crime. Also, but the boldness of the crimes is worse. There was among the criminals in the old days a certain respect for the police. They were afraid of them. You didn't see people looting stores in large numbers and the police stood by and watched, did you? Well, no, we retreated that in 2020. The Democrats did that, and they taught criminals to do it. I made that point the second time it happened. First time it happened. Made the point when the little boy mayor of Minneapolis, Democrat, gave up a police station. I was going to reverberate all around America. Criminals follow the news. They follow trends and instincts. They look for opportunities and they pounce on them. And you watch those retail crash-ins now, like the 2020 riots. Well, they are. Now, do you know that just about everyone involved in those riots was set free? Some of them have been given millions of dollars. You know who did that? Soros district attorneys. I believe they picked those cities because Soros had criminals as did let them free, like the district attorney who prosecuted the couple who were just defending themselves. I mean, that was just one example. There's no comparison between those riots in 2020 and, by the way, January 6th. 4 people died on January 6th orders, and they were the two most obvious ones were killed by the police, by the Capitol Police, without consequence at all, and under circumstances where there's tremendous cover up of all the facts surrounding it. So here's what it comes down to. The underlying crime, which is not a crime, is called false papers. They prepared and entered false papers. That's a misdemeanor. These papers are not false in the sense that, and the falsity has to be something someone's going to rely on. These papers are what the two parties wanted them to be. It is not uncommon for non-disclosure agreements to use fictitious names, anonymous. There's got to be some identification at the end so you can enforce them. But very often, even the circumstances are dealt with in euphemisms, because remember, the whole purpose is to protect reputation of the innocent. And so let's say the woman was not lying like Stormy Daniels is. She's already paid damages to Donald Trump. Already had to pay damages. The U.S. Attorney's Office has already concluded that there was not a case to bring. So it's fair for me to look at all the facts and also know a lot of things about my friend of 32 years to tell you this didn't happen. But in any event, let's assume for a moment it did, okay? Let's assume it did happen to woman X by Mr. So woman X is approached by Mr. Y, who does not want to be embarrassed by the allegations, doesn't want his family hurt by it, doesn't want, and therefore puts up a sum of money that's equivalent to what you would win at trial, or maybe somewhat less than what you would win at trial, but much easier to get your hands on them without any expenses involved. And also, for sure, because nobody knows whether they're going to win a trial. Nobody ever knows that. I mean, even lawyers at best will give you percentages. If any lawyer that tells you you're definitely going to win is an unethical lawyer, an ambulance chaser. Now, I really didn't know that Cohen was a lawyer. I'd never heard a lawyer talk like that. Had not many lawyers talk like that. I do know some lawyers that lie, but not like that. Wow. And I'm telling you, every person around President Trump used to say, "Get rid of that guy." And he just had a soft spot for him. But he didn't trust him with anything really serious. I know that. And hostile to him, and other people humored him. But he was constantly trying to prove himself, which is what led to this. People say, well, why did he put the money out? Because he was sucking up. He was actually had been excluded from the campaign. Several times I had been admonished. I don't know why me, admonished by the campaign manager at the time for not keeping Cohen off television, because he wasn't a part of the campaign. And he would go on television and get interviewed for Trump. But it was a complete fraud because he had nothing to do with the campaign. And the president wouldn't call him and say, shut up, stupid. So I would have to do that. I didn't do it. I always actually had a cordial relationship with him because I humored him. I thought he was, I like most others, couldn't figure out what the heck Trump was doing with him. And half the time, but I humored him and did not realize he was a pathological liar. Just the lie that Bob Costello revealed tonight. I mean, we didn't have that lie. Remember, this is the guy now who has become an honest citizen who tells the truth, right? So please, come on, Bragg, wake up. Even a crazy progressive communist like you has to have a brain. The guy said he didn't waive. He lied on the lying network, MSNBC. But just because MSNBC, everybody lies, doesn't mean Cohen can do it. And he's definitely lying because there's the paper that Bob showed you with his signature on it, waiving the attorney-client privilege. Numerous times affirmed that he waived the attorney-client privilege. There are public statements to that effect. That's just a flat-out lie. It's like, I never asked for a job in the administration. And then you see him, Chris Cuomo saying, congratulations on seeking and obtaining the job of chief of staff. Oh, thank you, Chris. I really always wanted to be. I think I'll be able to do a good job for President-elect Trump. Put them right next to each other. Under oath, lie. Or, I didn't waive the attorney-client privilege. Here's the document with a signature on it. Lie. Now, at the time at which he is testifying as the chief witness, looks like a criminal DA. I consider him a criminal DA. Let me tell you why. Maybe law breaking, maybe. He took an oath of office to enforce the law. And the day he took it, he put out a document saying he would enforce about half the laws of the state, including, by the way, armed robbery, which he would plead down if nobody was shot. Resisting arrest, which meant that you could beat the living daylights out of a cop and get away with it. He changed a few of those, kind of. He still's got beats. Every day, almost every day, there's an example of a guy that he let out that beat the hell out of somebody viciously, broke into stores, shot people. Reason this throwing people on the subway thing, and the fixation with going after defenseless elderly people seems to be almost epidemic. But they know they're going to get away with it. And as I said, where you live, because if you live in one of about 40 or 50 cities, and maybe we'll put together a complete list of it. I've actually seen a couple of articles last year. There were a couple of articles equating Soros with all of the murders that took place. In fact, there were articles accusing him of being responsible for those murders. Oh, I should point out, by the way, that the vast majority of the people murdered are black, and a lot of them are young black men who are being slaughtered by the failure to keep predatory criminals in jail, which is the basis of a Soros prosecutor. That jail is not good. It creates more crime. The evidence of the last 3 years, with records being set for homicide, proves their thesis is incorrect. You'd think they'd stop experimenting sympathy, particularly those who claim to be in favor of Black Lives Matter. Think they would think that the lives of these young black men that are being killed mattered, but they don't. They don't matter. Oh, and by the way, Soros, you should know, is the biggest contributor to the cop killing communist Black Lives Matter. It's both, right? Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon, every protest. They're telling people to kill cops. Their second premise, get rid of the father, state at 2 years old. That's Patrice Cullors and her two other who began as lesbian advocates, because there's a lot of that there, a lot of the transgender stuff there in Black Lives Matter, and then used the racial component to really take the critical theory of Marx and apply it to the critical race theory, and became multi-millionaires. And she's now living the life of a multi-millionaire, which all high-level communists do. Well, he's the biggest contributor to Antifa. He's the biggest contributor to Joe Biden and the Democrat Party. He's the biggest contributor to 40 to 50 DAs who are presiding over crime waves and homicides in their city that are shocking and inhumane. And also a very, very strong opponent of American nationalism. He thinks we should wipe out American nationalism and become part of one world, along with Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab believes the same thing, one world. We'll all have up, and we'll be allowed to do what they would want us to do, all us peons. So this isn't isolated. It isn't all by itself. But there's got to jump out at you that we have become, we're no longer on the road to fascism. I mean, look, when Garland was talking about parents being terrorists because they're worried about their kids being unduly influenced to change their sex or getting hormones and not knowing about it or getting mutilated, and didn't reveal to us that his son-in-law makes money encouraging kids to change their gender. He's got a big program all over the schools. Did you know that? You didn't know that. You didn't know that, did you? Because like the Hunter Biden hard drive, that's hidden by the corrupt fascists who run this country. Prosecuting for political purpose is the sine qua non of a fascist government. It's a fascist action. Exaggerating. Nobody's using hyperbole. It also is the sign of a decaying civilization and system of law. It's not a sign of, it is the decay of the system of law. Civilization comes down soon thereafter. So, do we have some calls? A couple other things I wanted to tell people about the connection between the Chinese Communist Party and the Biden now is being rekindled by Congressman Comer. I say rekindled because all of this is out there already. Just go back to my podcast. You got most of it.
Mayor, you were covering this 3 years ago.
Yeah, I know, but okay, they're a little slow. But the Haley thing, I didn't have at the money.
Yes, we didn't have that name.
We didn't have that name. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, she was his lover and his sister-in-law and lover, but they had a very, very contentious relationship, such that there was a point at which she wanted him kept away from the children because he was a danger to them. And I think she uses the word sexual. And the psychiatrist backed her up. And then in a conversation with his father, he says that this is terrible what Haley did to him, labeling him as a sexual danger to the kids, and that the young girl denied it. But then all of a sudden, almost as a non sequitur, he says to his father, quote, and this is, it's in the text, "I am a danger to the children," Hunter admits. Our evil president did nothing about that. What a grandfather. Like the child he doesn't acknowledge.
Thank you for joining us, and give us a call at 306-8836. Call now. That's 1-646-306-8836.
Any
That
good
number's
text?
on the.
You got a question? Any good texts?
We are getting a lot of texts. A big comment that's coming up here, Mayor. We'll take this call here. A big question that's coming up, Mayor, is whether or not this helps the president politically for 2024.
Is it
When I say the
interesting?
president,
I stayed away from that. I stayed away from that because I don't think anyone knows. I would, if I had to, one side of it or another, I would say it certainly helps him solidify the Republican base, the primary voters, and makes it that much more difficult. Already ahead by in some cases, a good number, and in others, an astronomically large number. I would say this kind of solidifies it. It really depends on whether, on how good a job the crooked press does in covering this all up and trying to twist it around, which would be a great disservice to our country. This is one of the worst things that has happened from the point of view of our Constitution, our justice system, our movement toward fascism in the history of this country. If it is recognized that way, just the Republican base, if that seeps into people who are even partially persuadable, then this could help elect him. Or should he not run? I mean, it's always conceivable. Who knows? Any Republican. But I think it helps him. I think it also makes the point that what they've done to him is just completely intolerable, and they have created an impression for you that you really have to be a strong, independent-minded person to understand the and accept and see the contributions of Donald Trump, because they've done everything to destroy him, everything. And with that, he's got to be one of the most successful first-term presidents ever. And then you look at the switch around to now, and it's a disaster.
Well, Mayor, the phone lines are lighting up. Let's take our first call, and we're going to go to Rob in New Jersey. Rob, are you there?
Here.
Rob, how are you?
How are you doing, Mayor? I'm doing well. Just, it just occurs to me, and I think it should occur to everybody, especially Democrats. I would like them to hear these words, which is ever since the Marxists decided to take Donald Trump and the American people, ever since they realized that Trump and the American people were going to stand in the way of their decades-long march toward totalitarian takedown of the USA, which has defaulted into a technocratic takeover. Ever since this, we've been bearing witness to the Saul Alinsky meets George Orwell, 1984.
Excellent.
I said, I mean, a takedown of the education system by convincing kids that in place of a substantive education, they should be thinking about cutting body parts off. For what? To resemble an anatomically correct G.I. Joe and Barbie dolls. And now the American taxpayers should pay for the destruction of our monetary system in an obvious Ponzi scheme of too big to fail. What does it take to make it possible for Democrat voters to snap out of the mass formation psychosis that they're obviously embroiled in and understand that they are simply a subject of a successful brainwash and demoralization campaign? What does it take?
Rob, I think it takes one of these things like this to crack through, because I still believe that a large percentage, even of those people out there, haven't completely been brainwashed. And even brainwashed people can be turned around if they're put in shock. And it depends on which thing affects you the most. I think a certain amount of it has happened with parents. I think the McAuliffe statement was a seminal moment in that area. And all of a sudden, parents became aware of the fact that the state wanted to take their children away. I don't know if they link it to communism yet, the way they should. You know, the interesting thing, Rob, and you and I have talked about this, if you take all these things we're talking about and you put them on a chart or a piece of paper, as I've done sometimes in podcasts, it's not a coincidence that all of these you can find in communist literature. In fact, most of them you'll find right in Black Lives Matter literature. In other words, the taking over of the schools, the destruction of our patriotic heroes, the desecration of our flag, all of the hate America rhetoric, like our president saying we're systemically racist. You could start to hate a country that was systemically racist, right? all of these things, or the destruction of our economy so that we have chaos, and therefore we'll embrace an all-world Saul-Alinsky model economy, or maybe a George Soros and Klaus Schwab type of economy, or a Chinese-dominated world where all these guys are making a fortune. I don't think. I think single individual shocking acts have cracked through, like the one I mentioned about parents. I think the lying about trying to change the sexuality of children is rightfully frightening parents. And the whole idea that the state knows more about bringing up your child than you do is a quintessential communist theory. It comes to us from communism. No one ever believed that before. The redistribution of wealth, which is what the green movement's all about. I mean, just the other day, we passed the day in which that Greta, whatever she's called, Thunberg, yeah, Thunberg. Well, we passed the day the world was going to end. A couple of days ago, it was supposed to end. And of course, Gore's, the South was going to be filled with water. Florida wouldn't be there. That was 2010. So you say, well, what is that? Was that just Al Gore trying to make billions for himself? Well, he did. I mean, was it just a con job? It was a con job, but it's a communist con job in order to redistribute wealth, take down the rich countries so they can't oppose communism, with expenses that are completely unnecessary, distribution to countries where the money's going to get stolen and not used to help anybody but the Democrats. It's what the Bidens do. The Bidens are entitled to steal. And now I think more people are beginning to see the connection. I mean, if I were to say this 10 years ago that, we're moving toward or we've arrived at fascism and communism, they would claim I was like a crazy McCarthyite and all this other stuff. Now people look at you and they assess it, and some agree and some say, well, maybe that's going a little too far, but I can see elements of it. And so maybe I'm being too optimistic, Rob, but I think it's happening a little too slow. There is a danger they could do irreparable damage if they haven't done it. I don't think so. I think there's a chance to turn this around. And I think it is turning around. But it isn't turning around like on a dime. It's turning around incrementally. And believe it or not, a shocking act like this, where you say, well, will it elect Trump? I guess I believe it will, probably. But in any event, I think it will shake a lot of people. When you see Trump, anti-Trump prosecutors going on television and saying this is too much, they went too far. And they couldn't have picked a worse DA to do it. A guy who, lets criminals go free left and right and is hated here in New York. I mean, even Democrats hate him. I mean, because most of the people getting beaten up and killed are Democrats. A lot of them are black. Okay. Who else do we have? Ted?
We have on the line Lois in Minnesota. Hello, Lois.
Lois, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, nice and clear. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, so are you. Thank you. I just have a question.
Yeah.
They're considering denying Trump bail. What happens?
Oh,
I mean, do they appeal or how do they handle this?
It would be really interesting. He'd be the only guy in New York who's been denied bail, who's been held probably in 3 years. I mean, we let multiple murderers go free so they could keep up their quota of murders. Drug dealers, I think there's a rule. We only hold them. After 4 hours, we let them go, not to interrupt their business, which is why we have, which is why we have so many people dying of fentanyl, which is another thing. This guy is presiding over the slaughter of young kids with fentanyl and doesn't do a damn thing about it that's effective. Like put the people who sell it in prison forever.
But Mayor, that is not a real possibility, right? Where they would deny it.
No, he can't be denied bail. No, he can't. I mean, he can't. Not on these charges. I mean, no, it would the courts in New York can be political, but they're not that bad. That would be unthinkable for a charge like
Well,
this. This is a
Bragg has
misdemeanor.
no moral.
This
you
is a
know,
misdemeanor that I don't think has ever been
Right.
applied to a non-disclosure agreement. So it's a questionable crime to start with. And the way they try to make it into a felony is they say it was for the purpose of violating the federal campaign finance law. Now that's going to get knocked out because what a role does the state have in enforcing the federal finance law when the federal government has already concluded not to do that? So I have to imagine there'll be a fair number of judges, even if they're anti-Trump and who realize the absurdity of the legal position. I mean, among other things, these people are extraordinarily stupid lawyers and get away with it because they don't compete in a place in which they're judged by the law. They're judged by crooked politics. So, what else?
We are getting a call. The phones have been ringing off the hook, Mayor. So we'll take another call. So
And if you see a good text, we don't want to ignore them either. People,
don't want to ignore chat group. Of course, now with phone calls, we now have phone calls and a chat room. So let's go to Indianapolis. Hello.
Hello?
hi, how are you?
Hi, good.
What's your name?
Uh, well, she lives in Indianapolis. Can I give
Okay.
you a
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Okay, she lives.
Good.
What's up?
I am in Indianapolis and we have a George Soros DA here,
That's what I would say.
Marion County. Well, he ran as a Republican. So my question to you is how do we know how do
Wow.
we look these people up? Yeah, this is a Republican state for sure.
And did he run as a Republican? And did he make clear of what he was going to do when he ran for DA?
Not really.
No, you see.
People wouldn't have voted for him.
So I tell you, at least you can say for Bragg, he made it clear to the stupid people who voted for him that he was going to let everybody out of jail. He did.
Exactly.
Most of these Soros prosecutors do make it clear to the brainwashed electorate, but they get elected in these Pavlovian Democrat cities. Like Chicago's been Democrat for 50 years, and all the Democrats have ever done is to help get people slaughtered there. I mean, the weekends are war level killings, particularly of young black kids. But for some reason, they're so brainwashed that they continue to vote Democrat. And what can you do to save them? I mean, all you can do is tell them. A lot about New York. New York elected this idiot Democrat Governor Hochul, and people just leave. So, what's the name of your DA? Oh, are you still with us, Lois? The mayor. So, is that Bob?
Yeah. If I give you a number, can you call in?
We would love to talk to Bob. He was terrific.
Okay. It's on our.
You can see what a good lawyer he is. So we may be hearing from Bob Costello, who was the lawyer that was interviewed some while ago by Tucker Carlson, trying to point out the how can you say this? The utter lack of credibility of. I mean, Cohen is a walking lying machine. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious. Can't say that. It's absolutely telling that he lied tonight on the lying network, MSNBC. That may be. That is not the call we're looking for. But I mean, there he is saying, I did not. I didn't. I didn't waive the attorney-client privilege. And then Bob pulls up this paper, and there's his signature, waiving the attorney-client privilege. It looks like you waived the attorney-client privilege, Bozo. I don't know that he can get through a half hour without lying. I don't know that he could. I mean, there's a tape recording of about 2 hours with him and Chris Cuomo. That also is very telling, in which Chris Cuomo tries everything he can to get him to incriminate Trump, and he doesn't. This is just between the two of them. He was taping everybody. He was taping everybody. He's taping his client, Trump, when he was theoretically Trump's lawyer. You know how unethical that is?
All right, Mayor, we now have on the phone your longtime friend.
Yep, and lawyer, Bob Costello. Bob?
Yes, sir. How are you?
Well, you did a good job, and everybody heard your interview on Tucker Carlson.
Mike.
How? So, what do you think? Are they definitely going to go forward with this?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, quite frankly, the DA's office, I called them on Friday and I told them the salient points that I had to make. And they did their best to try and not ask me those questions. So once I recognized what they were doing, I volunteered the information to the grand jury anyway. I gave them, for example, 330 emails. They only put 6 into evidence. Absolutely ridiculous. I said to them, why, and right in front of the grand jury, I said, why don't you give the grand jury all the rest of these emails that I've given you? And I held them up, showing the grand jury. And they said, there's inadmissible evidence. I said, in what way? They said, it's hearsay. I said, really? Well, these records were made and maintained in the regular course of business. And it was the regular course of business to make and maintain these records in my law firm. That makes them business records.
I know, yeah.
Which makes that an exception to the hearsay. I said, so give the records to the grand jury. They're going to have a big problem by not.
And they said no.
They're undercutting their case.
They said no.
They just didn't do it. They didn't do it. I mean, they didn't say anything. They just didn't do it.
So
And I showed the grand jurors all the rest of the records I gave them that they didn't produce to the grand jury. I said, you people should demand this from the prosecutors. They're not answering. They're not being fair. They're not giving you all the information.
So this just underscores the political hit job that this is, as opposed to, any kind of prosecution with any legitimacy.
Without a question. I mean, there were 8 assistant DAs in the grand jury. 8. This is a relatively simple case. One DA would have been sufficient if he was acting honorably, but they weren't trying to give the grand jury the information that I thought was pertinent that showed that Michael Cohen has been lying. So,
well, they probably had 8.
Where I got, yeah, go ahead.
They probably had 8 assistant DA because they don't prosecute anybody anymore. These guys had nothing to. They had nothing to do. I mean, if you're a murderer, a rapist, or they just process them back. They process them back out on the street.
Maybe they thought they were getting grand jury experience by just sitting there.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, they got some grand jury experience because they found a witness who would not be manipulated, who was there to tell the truth. I don't have any horse in this race. I don't represent Donald Trump. I told the grand jury I provided the same information to Donald Trump's lawyer as I provided to the district attorney. So I said, but they're not providing it to you.
Yeah, I mean that is pretty darn close. I don't know state law as well as I know federal law, but that is pretty darn close to a violation that could dismiss the indictment for a failure.
I would think so.
Failure to present exculpatory evidence.
No question.
A prosecutor has an obligation to present exculpatory evidence. He's not like a defense lawyer.
So Brady versus Maryland.
Yep. So there you go. Well, I mean, I think it must have been quite an experience.
Wow.
Well, let's see what happens.
And then I had an interview outside my office building in which I expressed to the people exactly what was going on. And I showed them, by the way, that there's a book that was written in 2000.
Yeah. Tell us about that. The Fixers.
Yeah, by Joe Palazzolo, who was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Well, he called me up after Mr. Cohen had waived the attorney-client privilege, and he said, "Listen, I'd like to sit down with you and get a lot of the information that you have now that you can speak about it, but I'm not going to write a news story. You know, I promise you that. I'm going to put it in a book, and it probably won't be out for a year or two." And I forgot. I gave him all the information. I forgot about it. He actually sent me a copy of the book that unfortunately my wife filed away, and I didn't see it until he called me on Sunday afternoon and reminded me. And I said, "What's in this book? Do you have the waiver of the attorney-client privilege?" Because the Manhattan DA's office didn't know that Cohen had waived.
They didn't know that he waived the. They didn't know it. What kind of investigation did they do?
Exactly. They didn't know it. And tonight, Michael Cohen denied waiving.
I saw it.
Privilege.
And I saw you.
So that's why I was waiving it. Right. On Tucker, I showed it. So in any event, I looked at this book, and it not only has the waiver, it has all of the stuff that we were trying to convey to the grand jury in it. All of the stuff, you know, these reporters say, "Well, what did you tell the grand jury?" Here's what I told them: take a look at that book, because that book has our memos in it, the same memos that the district attorney is keeping from the grand jury.
Now
I think it's a real problem for them.
You unfortunately had to spend a lot of time studying Cohen. I actually think when you watch what happened tonight with the attorney-client privilege, he's incapable of telling the truth.
Let me tell you the line that I gave to the grand jury that the district attorney wasn't very happy about. I simply said to the grand jury, "If you put a gun to Michael Cohen's head, he still couldn't tell the truth." That's pretty graphic.
Yeah. You know, and also, Bob, he's a stupid liar because he lies about things you can clearly contradict him. I mean, he's got to remember he signed the thing. He's got to remember he was on Chris Cuomo's show asking for a job, and then he says under oath that he didn't. I we got about 10 of those where I don't know, maybe I think he's probably spent. He is sort of a Russian mafia wannabe. He likes to talk like that.
But keep in mind, this is a guy who, in our first meeting, kept on saying 20 times, "Guys, I will do whatever the F I have to do. I will never spend a day in jail." Well, he was sentenced to 3 years in jail. And during that 3 years, he was sitting there thinking of the revenge that he was going to wreak on Donald Trump.
Yeah, and
that's what he's doing now.
He got out kind of short time because of COVID too.
Exactly.
I don't know how much he spent in jail, but they're all afraid that he might die of COVID.
Right.
I don't think I think people who are pathological liars are immune to COVID. I do. I think there's an antibody. Well, Bob, we'll talk again. You get home safely. All right. Yeah. God bless you. God bless you for serving justice. I mean, there's a really exceptional guy in the sense that, like me, when he sees injustice, he can't rest. I mean, that's why I became a lawyer. That's why they suspended me. This is the same bar association that, you know, they're the same people that vote for the Braggs and the sit by and watch all this happen to our justice system, and then they come after us. I mean, what the bar association should be concerned about is the fear that has been created by the left wing in representing Trump or a right wing cause. That is systemic damage to the legal profession and the Sixth Amendment, not anything I did. Well, I think we've covered it tonight. I think we've covered it probably as clearly as anyone could, and I think we've called it out honestly, which you're probably not going to get elsewhere. Realize that this is way beyond Donald Trump. This is not whether it elects him or it doesn't. That's why I avoided that calculation. We have plenty of time for that calculation. This should be opposed by every decent American. And the idea that it could happen to you is not a false fear. You got one of these prosecutors probably in your, like the lady that called us from Indianapolis. You got one of these maniac prosecutors paid for by George Soros who wants us to become something akin to a communist or fascist or Nazi state. Well, we'll keep on top of this and we'll see what happens. And maybe there is still the possibility that someone will talk sense into Bragg's head. There must be people even on their side that realize that this could be extraordinarily catastrophic for them. I sure would look at it that way. I mean, you can't live in fantasy world forever, and you can't keep going to the well all the time with the same craziness and assaulting people this way and not expect that, hey, after a while they're going to wake up. I mean, you've been selling them a bill of goods for a long time now, particularly the black population, you Democrats. It's gonna turn. Blacks should recognize, first of all, you're the damn party of slavery. Why the heck you keep that name, Democrat? Nothing more associated with slavery than the Democrat Party. Well, we'll be back tomorrow. And please, I'll also be on tomorrow between 3 and 4, and I'm sure we'll be talking somewhat about this and people about this on WABCRadio.com. And we'll be back here at 8 o'clock tomorrow night with an equally fascinating, insightful, and honest show. God bless America. We need your help, God, but we do appreciate your allowing us to